They cuffed me in my own driveway, while my neighbors hid behind curtains, pretending not to see. Two men in crisp uniforms shoved me toward their squad car, shouting about unpaid community dues and criminal property damage. The smell of burnt ribs still hung in the air from my family barbecue, my Saturday peace turning into a public mugshot. My teenage daughter, Lena, froze on the porch, eyes wide with terror as she watched her dad, her hero, hauled off like a common criminal. Cold metal dug into my wrists while the so-called officers barked orders that didn't feel right, because they weren't real. Welcome back to Tomato Tales, where the stories sound too crazy to be true, but every detail comes straight from real-life chaos. Buckle up, because this one is personal. I'm Chief Daniel Cross, 20 years in law enforcement, and those men who arrested me, hired actors, costume badges, scripted lies, sent by Veronica Slate, the power-obsessed president of our homeowners association, who thought she could break me with fear. She had no idea she'd just picked a fight with a man who builds airtight criminal cases for a living. But I didn't show my badge. I didn't fight back, not yet. Sometimes the best way to win is to let your enemies record their own crimes. So, let's rewind 6 months, to when I first moved into Maplewood Grove, the prettiest trap in suburbia. I came here to start over. My wife, Elena, had fought cancer for 18 brutal months before it took her. The house she circled in real estate magazines became my last promise to her, the dream she never got to live in. I bought it with her life insurance payout, telling myself it would heal the hole she left behind. The only thing keeping me grounded was my daughter. Lena, 16, brilliant, stubborn, my reason to keep breathing. Every weekend we worked together in the garage, restoring a 1968 Camaro. The scent of oil, steel, and her vanilla perfume mixed with classic rock bouncing off the walls. The only moments when the world didn't feel empty. For 3 peaceful days, it almost felt like life was normal again. Then, the letters started. 3 bright yellow envelopes slapped onto my door like warning signs from hell. Grass half an inch too tall. Mailbox the wrong shade of black. Garbage cans visible 4 minutes past pickup. 4 minutes. I timed it, that's when she appeared. Veronica Slate. Silver hair pulled tight, a smile sharp enough to draw blood, and eyes that scanned your soul like a credit report. She didn't just run the HOA, she ruled it. And that's when I realized this wasn't going to be home. This was the beginning of a war, because what started as petty fines would soon explode into a full-blown criminal operation. One that ended with fake cops, federal charges, and a revenge she never saw coming. Stick around, subscribe to Tomato Tales, and don't blink 3 days in. I realized I hadn't bought a dream home. I'd bought a front-row seat to suburban tyranny. Veronica Slate wasn't just the HOA president. She was the self-crowned monarch of Maplewood Grove. 52, silver hair pulled tighter than a drumhead, smile stiff as porcelain, eyes that scanned you like a tax audit. Her Mercedes prowled the streets every morning, headlights slicing through fog like searchlights in a prison yard. The first time I saw her, she was flanked by 2 clipboard-carrying loyalists outside my house. She didn't wave. She didn't introduce herself. She just looked at my mailbox, squinted, and scribbled something down like she'd caught a felony in progress. That evening, an envelope appeared on my door. Violation notice. The paint on my mailbox was graphite black, not obsidian black. Fine, $250 next morning. Another envelope. Grass height exceeded community limit by half an inch. Fine, $300. By day 3, I was apparently a one-man crime spree. Leaving garbage cans visible for 4 minutes after pickup. 200 garden hose rolled counterclockwise. 500, I wasn't living in a neighborhood anymore. I was living in a satire of civilization. At the next HOA meeting, I showed up out of pure curiosity, and maybe morbid fascination. 30 residents sat in folding chairs like hostages pretending everything was fine. Veronica stood behind a lectern under a banner that read, "Preserving Perfection." "Mr. Cross," she purred when she spotted me. "We do appreciate order here. I'm sure you'll adjust." Every smile in that room froze. No one made eye contact. They all knew the unspoken rule. Cross Veronica, and she'd bleed you dry with fines. That night, my detective instincts kicked in. I compared those processing fees at the bottom of each citation, $75 each, against state code. The legal limit for administrative costs, $1.25. Veronica Slate wasn't managing a community. She was running a racket under HOA letterhead. I documented everything, times, dates, photos, because sooner or later, paper trails lead straight to handcuffs. Then one dawn, while sipping burnt coffee and watching my neighbor prune her roses, something glinted down the street. A golf cart, not the friendly retirement community kind. Matte black paint, amber strobe light, two uniformed figures inside, snapping photos of driveways like crime scene techs. There weren't just one or two. There were 6. That's when I realized Veronica hadn't just built a neighborhood. She'd built her own private police force. And their next target was me. At first, I thought they were just overzealous security guards. Then I saw one of them aiming a telephoto lens straight through my window. That's when I knew. This wasn't about community safety. This was about control. By 7 a.m., Maplewood Grove sounded like a low-budget dystopian movie. The electric whir of golf carts echoed down the cul-de-sac as Veronica Slate's so-called compliance patrol rolled through the neighborhood. Each cart had flashing amber lights, magnetic decals that said community enforcement, and drivers wearing matching navy polos like they were part of some suburban SWAT team. They weren't greeting residents. They were documenting them, snapping pictures of cars, driveways, even front doors. Every flash felt like a warning shot. Mrs. Chen from across the street whispered through her blinds one morning, "They find me because my rose bush cast a shadow on the sidewalk." That's when I realized this wasn't enforcement. This was systematic surveillance. I pulled out my binoculars, old police issue. From behind my curtains, I watched the patrol stop at every single house, logging fake violations like clockwork. They weren't volunteers. They were paid enforcers. Veronica Slate had essentially built an unauthorized police force. No training, no badges, no legal authority. Just intimidation wrapped in polyester uniforms. I did what I always do when something smells wrong. I started digging. I cross-checked state records. No licensing, no insurance, no legal permissions. Her patrol wasn't just unethical, it was illegal. But the part that really burned me, each one of those patrol fines carried that same inflated $75 processing fee. It wasn't about keeping lawns neat. It was about profit. Organized financial fraud disguised as community management. So I started my counterattack. Quietly, I filed complaints with the city, the state, and the Attorney General's office. I began gathering video evidence. I tracked every illegal citation, every photo, every violation she fabricated out of thin air. And then I noticed her silver Mercedes start parking at the end of my driveway. Just sitting there, sometimes for 10 minutes, sometimes an hour, no movement, just watching. She knew someone was digging into her empire. She just didn't know it was me, because what Veronica Slate didn't realize was that the man she was trying to intimidate had spent 20 years training real cops how to catch criminals exactly like her. Hit that subscribe button if you're following this story, because her private patrol crosses the line from creepy to criminal. The day I found a camera lens pointed straight into my living room window, I stopped pretending this was just an HOA dispute. This was stalking, and it was personal. By week 4, every morning came with a fresh dose of psychological warfare. Violation slips tucked under my door like poison letters. New patrol routes passing my house every 15 minutes. Veronica Slate's private army had evolved from nosy neighbors to full-blown surveillance operators. And the part that chilled me most? They knew my schedule. When I left for work, when Lena got home, even when I watered the lawn. That wasn't random observation. That was reconnaissance, so I called in backup. Not official police, not yet. Just one man I trusted with my life. Detective Riley Thorne, my old partner. 20 years of surveillance experience. Sharp, paranoid in all the right ways. When Riley saw the footage I'd collected, the telephoto lenses, the driveway patrols, the bogus citations, his expression darkened instantly. "Dan," he said, leaning over my laptop. "This isn't HOA business. This is organized stalking. You've got grounds for federal charges." Together, we set up counter-surveillance, tiny motion-triggered cameras around my property, night vision units tucked under the gutters. Within 48 hours, we caught Veronica's patrol crossing into private driveways, taking pictures through residents' windows, felony-level trespassing, and then something even darker surfaced. One of her officers, a kid barely out of high school, came forward after quitting. He told Riley they were instructed to invent violations. "Doesn't matter if it's real," he said, "as long as there's proof." Proof meaning photos, often staged, sometimes cropped, always manipulated. It was official. Veronica Slate wasn't enforcing order. She was fabricating crime. I began compiling every shred of evidence, invoices, photos, timestamps, witness accounts. Each file stacked higher on my desk until it looked less like a neighborhood dispute and more like a federal fraud case. Then, late one night while I was reviewing footage, my cameras caught something that made my heart stop. Her silver Mercedes again. But this time she wasn't alone. Two of her compliance officers were standing beside it, installing a small black device at the edge of my driveway. When I zoomed in and saw what it was, my blood went cold. Because Veronica Slate hadn't just been watching me. She was trying to frame me. Hit subscribe and don't blink. The HOA queen crosses the line from harassment to outright crime. I zoomed in on the footage and my stomach dropped. That little black box sitting at the edge of my driveway wasn't a sensor. It was a GPS tracker. Someone was trying to put me at the scene of a crime I hadn't committed. Riley and I tore outside, hearts hammering, scanning the gravel under the porch light. The tracker blinked once, tiny red LED, before Riley scooped it into an evidence bag. "Dan," he said quietly, "they're not just watching you anymore. They're building a case against you." That's when everything clicked. Veronica Slate was setting me up, trying to make me look like the criminal she'd invented. Over the next few days, I noticed more signs. A cracked window in my garage, a missing wrench, and one morning, a cease and desist letter glued to my front door. She was accusing me of operating an unauthorized auto repair business. My garage, my healing place with Lena, was being turned into a crime scene. It wasn't about money anymore. It was psychological warfare. Riley ran the tracker's serial number through police databases. It was purchased online under a fake business account traced back to one of Veronica's contractors. Now we had proof, conspiracy, and stalking. Still, I couldn't go public yet. One wrong move and she'd twist everything into Chief Abuse's power. So I played along, kept mowing my lawn, waving to neighbors, pretending nothing was wrong. Inside, though, our house had become a command center. Evidence boards filled the walls. Photos, receipts, violation notices. Red string connected names and dates like a spider's web. Lena noticed the tension. "Dad, why don't you just arrest her?" she asked one night, wiping grease off her hands as we worked on the Camaro. I smiled, tight, tired. "Because justice isn't revenge, sweetheart. Justice needs proof." Then came the text from an unknown number. "You're next. Pay up or lose everything." It was followed by a photo, my garage door, taken minutes earlier. That's when I knew Veronica's game had changed. She wasn't trying to scare me anymore. She was coming for my home. Hit that subscribe button so you don't miss when the HOA queen finally crosses the line from threats to break-ins. The message said, "You're next." 10 minutes later, someone tried my doorknob. I froze in the hallway, pulse pounding. The glow from my security monitor painting the walls in ghost blue light. Outside, shadows moved across the porch, slow, deliberate. 2 figures in dark polos with the same embroidered logo I'd seen on Veronica Slate's fake patrol carts. They weren't delivering letters this time. They were casing my house. Riley's voice crackled through my phone. "Don't engage. Cameras are rolling." We'd installed a dozen hidden lenses around the property for moments exactly like this. Through the monitor, I watched one of them pull out a small canister, spray paint. He marked my garage door with a red X, the same symbol that had shown up on other non-compliant homes the week before. The other snapped photos through the window, whispering into a radio. They were fabricating violations in real time, planting the evidence that would justify the next wave of fines, or worse, foreclosure. When they left, I stepped onto the porch and looked at the crimson X. Under the porch light, it looked less like a symbol of code enforcement, and more like a target. The next morning, 3 envelopes waited on my doorstep, each one labeled final notice, each one claiming I owed thousands in damage. Assessments for vandalism, damage they had just caused. That's when I stopped reacting and started hunting. Riley pulled favors at the precinct to fast-track warrant requests. Meanwhile, I gathered the neighborhood. Mrs. Chen, Hank Morrison, the Williams family, all victims of Veronica's fabricated violations, met in my garage. Our new war room, stacks of photos, timestamps, and security footage covered the workbench where Lena and I used to rebuild engines. The air smelled of motor oil and burnt coffee, our scent of resistance. We plotted a timeline, matched vehicle plates, connected payment trails. Every path led back to one woman, Veronica Slate, president of Maplewood Grove, self-appointed queen, and now the prime suspect in a full-scale fraud and harassment case. But before we could bring her down, she made her boldest move yet. That evening, as the sun bled behind the rooftops, I returned home to find my front door open and a light flickering inside. The sound of footsteps echoed from my living room. She hadn't sent her enforcers this time. She'd come herself. Hit subscribe and stay locked for part 7, when I finally come face to face with Veronica Slate, and the HOA nightmare turns deadly serious. The door creaked open, and for the first time, I saw the woman who'd been pulling every string standing in my living room, Veronica Slate. She looked smaller in person, but her presence filled the room like poison gas. Quiet, invisible, suffocating. Silver hair slicked back, silk scarf around her neck, manicured fingers tracing the edge of a framed family photo on the mantel. "You've made quite the mess." "Chief Cross," she said, voice dripping with arrogance. "I warned you. Maplewood Grove runs on order, not rebellion." I stepped forward slowly, phone in my pocket, already recording. "Order?" I said. "You mean extortion, harassment, and trespassing." Her eyes flicked toward the hidden camera light on my bookshelf. She noticed. For the first time, her mask slipped. She smirked. "Careful what you record, Daniel. Defamation's an ugly thing." The audacity almost made me laugh. Here was the queen of fines and fear standing in my home trying to gaslight me in real time. Then she dropped the bomb. "You should have paid your dues. But don't worry. By next week, this house won't be yours anymore." She pulled a folded document from her purse and dropped it on the coffee table. "Foreclosure notice, stamped with HOA letterhead and fake signatures. Your account," she said, "is delinquent. Property seizure is standard procedure." That's when I realized her whole scheme was bigger than harassment. It was property theft. Veronica was forcing families into foreclosure, buying their homes cheap through shell companies, and flipping them for profit. All under the illusion of HOA authority. I leaned closer. You just handed me everything I need to put you away. For a second, she looked uncertain. Then that smug smile returned. Careful, Chief. People who go against me disappear. She turned to leave, but before the door closed, Riley stepped out from the hallway, badge glinting in the dim light. You're not going anywhere. Mrs. Slate, her eyes widened as she realized she'd walked straight into a sting. But what happened next no one saw coming. Because before Riley could make the call, the power went out. Don't blink of this story takes the HOA war into the dark. Subscribe so you don't miss the night everything turned violent. The moment the power cut, the house fell silent. No hum from the fridge, no streetlight glow. Just darkness thick enough to choke on. For half a second I thought it was coincidence. Then I heard the footsteps. 2 sets moving fast. One toward the back door, one toward the hall. Riley's flashlight flicked on, cutting a thin blade of white through the dark. Stay behind me, he whispered. Outside. The storm that had been brewing all day finally broke. Thunder rolled like cannon fire. Rain hammering against the windows. Somewhere in that chaos, a shadow darted past the kitchen. I caught a glint of metal. Riley, I shouted. He spun just as a shape lunged from the dark. The flashlight hit the floor, rolling, scattering light across the walls. Just enough to see the attacker's face. Not Veronica. One of her patrol enforcers. The same kid I'd seen marking my garage door. Only now he was armed with a tire iron. Riley intercepted him mid-swing. The two crashed into the coffee table, glass shattering. Thunder echoing outside like applause. I grabbed my phone. The camera was still recording from before the blackout. I aimed it at the chaos, making sure every second of this insanity was on file. Then came the second sound. The front door slamming open. Veronica's voice, sharp as broken glass. Stop. All of you. He's dangerous. He attacked me. The sheer audacity almost made me laugh. Even now she was trying to flip the story. But the police sirens in the distance were louder than her lies. Riley had triggered the silent alarm the moment the fight started. Red and blue lights flooded through the rain-soaked windows. For a moment I thought it was over, that maybe justice had finally arrived. Then one of the responding officers stepped inside, and my blood ran cold. It was Sergeant Cole, Veronica's cousin, and the look he gave me wasn't friendly. That's when I realized the rot went deeper than the HOA. She didn't just have a fake police force. She had people inside the real one. If you're still with me, hit that subscribe button. The game flips. When I turn her own system against her. When corruption runs deep, you don't dig harder, you dig smarter. Sergeant Cole's smirk said it all. He didn't walk in to investigate. He walked in to protect Veronica Slate. I'd seen that look before. From dirty cops who'd rather serve power than justice. Riley stepped forward, badge out. We have recorded evidence, Cole. You're not covering this up. Cole glanced at Veronica, then back at me. We'll see about that. The officers escorted her outside, but instead of handcuffs, she got an umbrella. I watched her climb into her silver Mercedes and drive off into the rain like nothing had happened. That night, Riley and I sat in the dark, replaying the footage over and over. We knew we couldn't trust local law enforcement, so we decided to fight her where it hurt most, her own system. We started with the bylaws. Every HOA operates on strict written rules, and Veronica had broken almost every one. Forgery, conflict of interest, misuse of community funds, you name it. Her signature appeared on documents she legally couldn't sign, and her contractors were paid from a phantom maintenance account. Riley reached out to the state attorney's office quietly. Meanwhile, I began leaking Veronica's own HOA violations anonymously to the homeowners. At first, no one believed it. Then they started checking their mailboxes. Same fines, same inflated fees, same fake violations. Within days, half the neighborhood was furious. We organized a meeting in my garage again. This time, 30 neighbors packed shoulder to shoulder. I played the footage on a projector. Her fake patrol, her trespassing, her break-in. Gasps filled the air. One woman started crying. Another yelled, "She took my house!" That's when I saw something new, hope. The fear that ruled Maplewood Grove was cracking, but Veronica wasn't done. The next morning as I left for work, a letter sat wedged under my windshield wiper. "You've made your point, Daniel. Stop now or lose everything you have left." That same night, my garage, our meeting place, went up in flames. If you're following this story, make sure you're subscribed. The fight stops being civil and turns criminal. The garage was gone before sunrise. All that was left was smoke, melted metal, and the smell of gasoline soaked into the rain. The fire chief called it accidental, but I'd seen enough arson scenes to know the truth. The burn pattern was deliberate. Tight ignition points. Accelerant poured along the baseboards. Whoever lit it knew what they were doing, and they knew exactly what I'd lost, because that garage wasn't just a workspace. It was my evidence room. Boxes of files, flash drives, printed HOA records, everything Veronica Slate wanted to erase. But what she didn't know was that Riley and I had already digitized everything. Every photo, every violation, every illegal fee. While the flames tore through the past, we were already preparing her future, behind bars. The next morning, I stood in front of the smoking ruins as neighbors gathered on the street. No one spoke. No one needed to. Their silence had turned into anger. Mrs. Chen handed me her phone. "It's happening again," she whispered. On the HOA app, new fines appeared overnight. Hundreds of dollars charged to every house that attended our last meeting. Veronica was doubling down. Retaliation disguised as administration, so Riley made the call. He contacted a federal investigator we'd both worked with years ago, Agent Marisol Vega, the kind of person who didn't flinch when corruption wore a smile. We sent her everything, the patrol videos, the forged documents, even the GPS tracker. Within 48 hours, a formal probe opened into Maplewood Grove. And just like that, Veronica Slate's fortress began to crack. Word spread fast. Residents stopped paying dues. Board members resigned. The HOA account froze. For the first time, she wasn't in control. But power addicts don't surrender. They implode. That night, my phone buzzed with a single message from a blocked number. "If you think this ends in court, you're wrong. Check your car." I ran outside. The rain hadn't stopped, washing the ash from the driveway. When I opened the driver's door of my Camaro, something glinted under the seat. A sealed envelope with my name written in perfect cursive. Inside was a single photo. My daughter Lena, walking home from school. She wasn't after my house anymore. She was after my family. If you've been following this story, now's the time to subscribe. The fight turns personal, and justice stops being polite. You can mess with my home, my job, my name, but the moment you come near my daughter, the rules change. I stared at that photo for what felt like forever. Lena's face, innocent, smiling, unaware, burned through me like a fuse. Veronica Slate wasn't playing power games anymore. She was declaring war. Riley's car screeched into my driveway minutes later. He saw the picture and went silent. Then, calm but deadly serious, he said, "We're done waiting, Dan. Time to take the gloves off." We started tracing every connection she had left. Riley hacked through HOA databases. I worked through property filings and phone records. Within hours, a pattern emerged. Every foreclosure property ended up owned by one of 3 fake companies, all with Veronica listed as consultant. It was a laundering operation. Fraud, intimidation, property theft, all buried under community paperwork. While Riley gathered evidence, I called Lena's school and arranged security. She didn't know why, and I didn't tell her. All she saw was her dad standing at the gate, waiting every day until the bell rang. Meanwhile, Agent Vega's team started their quiet infiltration. Undercover officers joined HOA meetings, posing as new residents. Every interaction, every conversation was recorded. Veronica didn't see it coming. She thought I was just a grieving widower she could bully. She had no idea I'd turned her perfect little kingdom into a federal sting zone. But then something happened I didn't plan for. Late one night, as I was reviewing footage from the new security feed, a familiar car pulled into the cul-de-sac. Silver Mercedes. She got out, alone holding a file folder, and walked right up to my front door. No guards, no patrol, just her. I opened the door before she could knock. She smiled like we were old friends. "I warned you to stop," she said softly. "You don't know who you're dealing with." I stared at her, unblinking. "Neither do you." I hit play on my phone. Audio from her last conversation with one of her enforcers, caught by an undercover agent. Her voice filled the air. "Plant it on his property. Make him the example." For the first time since I'd met her, Veronica Slate looked scared. And just as she turned to run, floodlights exploded around us, and a dozen federal agents stepped out of the shadows. You're not gonna want to miss when the Queen of Maplewood finally falls and her empire burns from the inside out. Subscribe now and stay tuned. When the floodlights hit her face, all the confidence drained out of her eyes. For the first time, Veronica Slate looked human, terrified, cornered, and completely powerless. Agent Vega stepped forward, badge gleaming in the rain. "Veronica Slate, you are under arrest for fraud, harassment, property theft, and obstruction of justice." It felt unreal. Months of manipulation, threats, and fear, all crashing down in one moment. Riley cuffed her while Vega's team moved through her Mercedes, pulling out folders, USB drives, and cash-stuffed envelopes. Evidence, so much evidence. As they loaded her into the unmarked car, she turned toward me, eyes sharp again, a faint smile creeping back. "You think this ends with me?" she said. "You have no idea how deep this goes." Even in handcuffs, she couldn't resist the last word. Over the next week, the investigation tore through Maplewood Grove like wildfire. Every shell company she'd built crumbled under scrutiny. Board members flipped, contractors confessed. Turns out Veronica's community empire stretched across 6 different neighborhoods, each one bleeding families through fake fines and bogus foreclosures. The news hit every local station. HOA president arrested in massive fraud ring. Her perfect image shattered overnight. Neighbors who once whispered behind curtains now stood in the street, hugging, crying, reclaiming their lives. The fear was gone, and yet even with her gone, I couldn't shake her words. "You think this ends with me?" A week later, I received a call from Agent Vega. They'd traced several of Veronica's transactions to a law firm, one that specialized in HOA management. The firm's senior partner? Thomas Slate, her husband. The network wasn't over. It was just exposed. Still, Maplewood Grove began to heal. The fake patrols vanished. The fines were erased. Lena finally slept without fear for the first time in months. One evening, as I grilled burgers on what was left of our patio, Riley raised a beer and said, "You won." "Chief, you beat her." I smiled, but deep down I knew the truth. You don't win against people like Veronica Slate. You just survive long enough to see their replacements coming. If you've come this far, hit subscribe and stay tuned. The aftermath, where I finally tell you what happened when she tried one last time. From behind bars, I thought it was finally over. But evil doesn't vanish when you lock it up. It just changes its address. 3 months after the arrests, Maplewood Grove was alive again. Kids on bikes, lawns unjudged, laughter where whispers used to live. The nightmare was fading until I got a letter. No return address. Postmarked from the state correctional facility. I opened it on the porch while Lena watered her plants. Inside was a single page. "You may have taken my crown, Daniel, but I still built the kingdom. Watch your back. V.S." The signature was bold, confident, written in the same blue ink she'd used on her fake violations. Part of me wanted to laugh. Part of me wanted to burn it. But the cop in me didn't do either. I called Vega. The agent sighed through the line. We've been tracking her communications. She's talking. A lot. Apparently, Veronica had been offering information to reduce her sentence, naming partners, judges, and city officials she'd bribed. Her network wasn't done. It was unraveling from the inside, and she wanted credit for bringing it down. I realized then that she couldn't stand silence. Even behind bars, she needed to be heard. So I made her silence permanent. I turned over the letter to the feds as evidence and never responded. Weeks passed. The investigation expanded beyond Maplewood Grove. Indictments, resignations, bank accounts frozen. The corruption she'd built was gone, swept away by her own arrogance. One evening, as the sun dipped low over the neighborhood, I sat on the porch with Lena. The rebuilt garage gleamed beside us, the Camaro finally restored. She handed me a wrench, grinning. Mom would have liked this, huh? I nodded, eyes on the horizon. Yeah, kid. She would have. For the first time in years, I felt peace. Then my phone buzzed, an email notification from an unknown sender. Subject line, Maplewood Phase 2. Attached was a single document, new HOA paperwork, same format, different name at the bottom. President, Thomas Slate. Some stories don't end with justice. They end with a warning, evil doesn't die, it just changes titles. Thanks for sticking through this story. If you want more true-life thrillers like this, subscribe and turn on notifications. Because on Tomato Tales, the next nightmare might already be moving in next door.